Hey everybody, welcome to another standalone episode of Parkitect. This week I'm going to be building a inverted roller coaster with an Asian theme. If you saw the last episode I did, I actually built a vertical, well beyond vertical drop, Gerstlauer Eurofighter roller coaster called Hang 10, and I showed you me building it in not so quick time lapse, and the video was a bit more popular than my other videos, so I decided to do another one of those style videos again. So as I just said, I am building an inverted roller coaster this week, and it will have somewhat of like an Asian Japanese kind of theme to it, although I didn't know that at this point of building it. So basically what I'm trying to do here is create just a very kind of typical looking B&M inverted roller coaster. Now B&M is a manufacturer company from Switzerland who make really good roller coasters. Some people say that some of the roller coasters are forceless or very repetitive, and all their rides are very kind of cookie cutter with all the same inversions, but regardless of that, they are very smooth, very high quality and very enjoyable. So most of the inverted roller coasters are by B&M, unless you ride a Vekoma SLC, but anyone will tell you that a B&M is way better. And so basically I've gone with a pre-drop at the top of the lift, which most of the older B&Ms have, and then I've gone with this sweeping drop curve kind of thing, which also most of the B&M roller coasters have, or the inverts anyway. So as I said, without using mods like I did in the last episode, I'm going to do the same thing and try and create everything without mods in this video. So here I'm just doing a kind of catwalk on the lift hill using some of the roof pieces, and then basically I'm just going to try and play around with some of the pieces to see what I can kind of create. So I'm going to use the border pieces here as kind of supports. I'm not going to show you every single support that I make on this ride because that would take really long, and this video was nearly 3-4 hours long, and I've tried to cut it down to as short as possible, and so it is still quite long, it's 40 minutes. So if you stick around for the whole video, then I salute you, congrats. If you don't, it's cool, don't worry. But I do show you some quite interesting things along the way, but I do try not to repeat myself a lot. So if I show you me building supports at the beginning of the video, I'll cut out the rest of the supports because it's basically very much all the same thing with laying pillars and border pieces to make the brackets and stuff like that. So you can kind of see how I do that here. And also in the last episode that I did of one of these kind of one episode projects, is I made some footers using some of the shapes and some of the pillars, and I kind of combined them together. So I'm using the same pieces that I used in the last episode. I just saved them as a blueprint, and then I shall place them around on the bottom of each support pillar. I will show me doing that a few times, but then as I said, like with the supports, with the rest of the coaster, I will skip that because you've seen how I do it. And I actually might try and put the footers that I made on the Steam Workshop so that you can download the same footers that I'm using on my rides for you to download into your parks. So here I go now, I'm just going to place in some of these footers that I just talked about. So you get the idea, so I'll whiz through that now. And now I'm just going to take a sloping border piece in the same colour as the supports and just kind of make a bit more of like a support looking structure. Normally these B&M lifts have more of like an A kind of support and like an A shape, and that's not really possible in the game with or without mods. So if you just go with the straight pillars and just kind of settle for that, it looks kind of okay. So now I'm going to use the cube from the shapes, and I'm going to make this little kind of box at the bottom, just kind of maybe where the mechanics would be for the lift hill. And I'm going to pop one of the gears on there from the prop section. Just for like some little details, nothing really too crazy. So I'm going to take a shrub and use that as a support killer. I did have some comments about the supports and using the bushes to get rid of them, and that was that when you close the game and you reopen it, some of the supports appear back up on the coaster but in other places. So to get around that, I just try and kind of close the game maybe 2 or 3 times and use the bush to make sure every support has basically been deleted. I normally find that every support has about 3 points where it will go to, and if you try and get all 3 points of the bush, then the support won't come back again. That can be quite tedious, but it's not really, doesn't take too long at all. So I'm just whizzing through the layout. This is something you've seen me do 100 times. So I'm basically just trying to create a very kind of typical layout, to be honest. It's not super imaginative or anything. I basically got a loop, a 0G roll, kind of like some swoops. I've got a mid-course brake run, and then some interlocking corkscrews, which isn't actually very common on B&M inverted roller coasters. The only one I believe has interlocking corkscrews is Nemesis Inferno at Thorpe Park. But I guess my layout is kind of based on that ride. It's very small and compact, and there's not really much length to it. So here I'm just kind of digging where the tunnels are. I don't want to have tunnels on the ride, so I'm just kind of digging to get rid of those tunnels, and I shall make basically some trenches. Now I'm going to put in these walls in grey to look like concrete where the trench would have been built. If you've ridden a few of the B&M inverted roller coasters, I really feel like most of them have at least some trenches or a tunnel somewhere. You really get that feeling that your legs are going to get caught on the floor or something, or the walls are really close to you. And I think that's kind of what makes the inverted roller coasters a bit special. But yeah, it's basically I wanted to have a trench just to kind of capture that style of some of the rides. I know that like Montu has a few trenches and stuff, and it's really cool when you kind of swing in through the trenches. So I'm just going to kind of create that. I didn't want it to be too blocky, so I've tried to put some diagonals in there. And then I'm going to take a roof piece and make it green, and I'm just going to fill up the diagonal sections to look like the land is diagonal. The green is a little bit off at the moment. I do come back and try and find a slightly kind of lighter green that kind of matches the grass a bit better, but for now that would do. And I'm just going to do a few kind of support things just to support the corkscrews there in the trench. Now, I just skipped a little bit ahead. I'm going to put some of the footers in that you've seen me do. And then actually I'm going to extend those footers to make them really go all the way down to the floor. So now I'm going to make the bottom of this trench grey, so like it's a concrete. So I'm just going to use the Terra painting to do that. So at the moment the trench is quite bare, but I will come back later on and add somewhat kind of some theming or some scenery around it, just to make it a bit more interesting. So now, using the same technique as I did on the lift hill, I'm going to use these roof pieces to make catwalks, one along the mid-course brake run, and then one on the actual final brake run of the ride. So basically I'm going to get the train into position so I can see how big it is, so I don't actually build the catwalk too high. You want the feet to be able to clear the catwalk. So I'm just going to place that in there. And then using the same pieces, the border piece and the pillars, I'm going to create the structure for that brake run area. So then if you've seen some roller coasters and you've kind of tried to look behind the scenes, or you've seen from above on like Google Earth or something, you'll notice that most rides have a storage warehouse shed with a transfer track. Now, transfer track is where the train can basically be pushed over to one side onto another piece of track and then slid back into the warehouse for maintenance. So I decided that this was a really good position of the ride to do that on. So I've basically just extended the supports outwards on the final brake run, and I've making a frame now to support it. And then basically the rest that I do is pretty self-explanatory. I just use some of the walls and pieces like that just to make this one big area look like a maintenance warehouse. So I shall let you watch me build the transfer track and the maintenance shed, and then I shall come back and talk about what I shall do next.
Well, we could survive without trees because we all originate from trees. Trees are our ancestors. Yes.
So that's practically that done. I'm just taking this fence piece. This is my favorite fence from the fence selection. I'm just putting it around the edges there just to give it a bit more detail. And that is that basically done. Now I'm going to support the mid-course brake run. You've seen me do this before, so I'm going to whiz through it with a time lapse. And now I'm just going to go around the whole ride and use the bush to get rid of every single support, so that I can complete every custom support that I will do using the pillars. For the pieces of track that are kind of banked, or like the drop here, I'm using the half piece border. I'm just going to place it around at kind of equal points around the track, and then I'm just going to put a pillar down one side to give it that kind of different look. Otherwise the whole thing looks like it's like a supported monorail. You can play around with those pillars and those borders, to be honest, and kind of create your own style things. It is quite difficult as the borders can only be placed on the edge of a tile, and sometimes you might want to have the border piece in the middle of a tile, and it's really difficult to try and get around. So I try to make every pillar be on the corner, on the edge of a tile, so that I can put a actual support in. So that's something to be aware of if you're doing that. So now I'm just going to go around every support and add like a kind of gravelly concrete base to it to make it look like that where the footer of the pillar was dug when it was being constructed. And then later on, when I've put down some more scenery and shrubbery, etc., I shall go in with that dark green kind of terra painting colour and do some more kind of shadowing and kind of just terra painting in the appropriate areas. So now I'm going to use the rocks to add a bit of scenery around the trench area. I think the rocks are really simple and really good to put down just to create something interesting. So if you've seen Black Mamba from Phantasialand, you'll know that that ride has a lot of rocks around it, and it's really cool when you're flying around the coaster and you kind of miss a rock and then you fly around a rock kind of thing. So I'm going for that kind of thing with this, just to make that area a bit more interesting. Another ride with rocks I can think of is Nemesis, and I believe those are real rocks, whereas the Black Mamba is all kind of man-made scenery. So I would kind of think that this is like a man-made scenery kind of section using the rocks. But it's really cool just to pop some in if you're coaster, make some kind of near misses and that kind of thing. So I'm very randomly placing these down where I think they might look good. And I thought it'd be good to continue this on in another part of the roller coaster just to make it all kind of tie in a little bit more together. So I thought I'd add like a rock kind of in this corner here, so you fly over that inversion and then you fly around the rocks there at the bottom. I always like to add some smaller rocks that kind of disperse out away from the main body of rocks, just to kind of create like a more organic look. So here we go, onto the station of the building. This is basically when I decide that this is going to have an Asian theme. I wasn't really sure. I had it in my head maybe I could do something to do with like an Asian theme and use some of the new shrubbery and that kind of thing. So when I was starting this station building, I had it kind of maybe in the back of my head that I was going to do that. And then as I started building, it just started to transform into this kind of somewhat Asian looking building. Now, I will put my hand up and swear that this is not like real Asian like kind of scenery. I have totally made it up from my head, and so if it is very incorrect, then I apologize. But I'm doing basically whatever comes into my head. The colours that I used changed maybe 3 or 4 times, especially this roof. It's just not really what I wanted, and when I took a step back from the ride and looked, I realised that the colours weren't really right. So bear with me with the colours. As I always say, colours are subject to change, and that is very much the case with this roof. I thought it'd be cool to add like a glass piece down the middle so that you can kind of see out of the station from inside by looking up. So that's something I haven't really done before, so I thought that was cool. Now I'm just going to kind of put a border around all the roof pieces to make it look a bit more structured. So now I'm going to go around the whole thing and kind of put some pillars in, and I'm just going to build up the pillars in different thicknesses and just try and kind of create something that looks somewhat good. This is trial and error, which is what I do quite a lot actually, to be honest. And I'm just kind of trying to find the correct colours and just kind of place things down. If I don't like it, I just delete it. But you don't really know what you like until you try it, to be honest. So I just kind of put down what I think might look good. So I thought it'd be cool to have like a bit of a pattern thing going on on each side. So that's why I'm kind of putting in these pieces, just to kind of try and make it a bit more interesting. So now I'm going to do something that I have done before. This is basically use these special pieces from the wall set and just lay them on top of each other, and basically build up layers and layers and layers that all these little pieces stick through, and kind of create this kind of somewhat looking Asian kind of decorative wall. If you remember very back along when I started my very first YouTube video kind of series, I built a no mod park called Heaven's Gardens, and I had like a little Asian kind of themed area in that park, and that is when I discovered that you could kind of lay these pieces on top of each other to create this somewhat looking Asian style wall. So I'm kind of using that again from that park, and basically just going to lay the pieces down into this design here. So you can use whatever you want. You could maybe put down some of the border pieces, a window with a wall, and then put the arch piece over the top of that, just to build up. You just play around with all the different pieces and see what looks best. But you can do anything, like with the designs. You could use the diamond window with a, I don't know, you could do anything. So it's really cool to play around with those pieces to see what you can create. So I'm going to go back to this cube. I think this is maybe one of my favorite pieces from the scenery. I seem to use it a lot, and it's definitely one of my favorite things. Yeah, I can make the chunky pillars, and you can make it bigger and smaller and basically do all sorts with it. I think it's great. So I'm just popping that pillar around the station, on the corners, and on kind of just places where it looks good. So here's the first colour change of the roof, and it's not what I end with. I don't really like the orange. At the time I was making this, I thought it looked cool, but when I look at it later on, I really changed my mind. So now I'm going to use the cylinder and just make it a little bit bigger than the square pillar, and just kind of add that around those areas, just to create a bit more depth and dynamic to the bottom of the station there. So I'm just going to put like a border trim around the whole station, around the floor area, just to kind of define it more. So now I'm going to take the fence with the diamond kind of shape in it, and then I'm basically going to put this around certain areas of the station. Sometimes on like Asian buildings you notice that they have like a trim under the roof edges, so I thought I could maybe kind of create something like that using this fence piece. So I'm just going to plop it around the station and see where it looks good. And I also thought that the white actually put like a nice little touch of highlight into the station, so it wasn't all just a big blob of these rich kind of reds and oranges. So that is the station basically complete. I'm just going to add the entrance and exit paths onto this ride. So I'm going to start off by doing the exit, really simple, just kind of a sloped path coming out of the station. And then with the entrance path, I actually wanted it to be slightly more interactive with the rest of the ride. So I'm going to kind of snake it around a little bit, take it going underneath some of the track, take it up towards the corkscrew. So maybe if you're in the path, you could see that part of the ride. And then take it back out under the lift hill there. So now I'm going to go around and use the shrubbery and just kind of place it in areas that it looks good, mainly around the rock areas. So I'm just going to speed up me doing that so you can see what I did really quick. Just going to use all the different kind of style bushes, the ones with the flowers, the slightly more greener one. And then I'm going to go in with this brilliant new tree that I absolutely love. This is one of my favourite trees in the game. The trees were pretty cool anyway, but they had kind of a slight kind of cartoon solid look to them, and these new trees actually have a bit more kind of realism aspect to them, and I like the colours and the shapes and the texture of them, so they look kind of really good when you put them in. Now because I decided to do an Asian theme, and once I built that station I thought what else could I do, and I realised that maybe I could build a pagoda. So this is something I've only ever done maybe once before, and it's not the most detailed or crazy pagoda. Obviously I'm using no mods, I'm just trying to use the pieces that I can. So I thought I'd start off by making a roof and seeing what that looks like. So I'm kind of happy with the placement. I thought it'd be cool to have the queue line go through the pagoda. So I'm basically going to do build the structure in the middle, and I'm going to use the same style technique that I did with the station by layering the walls up to kind of create an Asian styled wall. So I shall whiz through me building this and then talk a bit more about it when it's done. So I decided that I might actually use the curved roof pieces because they might look a bit more Asian. I know how the Asian roofs are like kind of they curve and flick up at the corners. So I decided to try and use this piece just to see what it looks like. Unfortunately, there's not a corner piece for the curve, so I decided to lay two of them together and kind of go with that design. There's not really much I can do about it, but actually I think it doesn't look too bad. So I go ahead and do that on all the corners. And then I'm going to just put this red kind of pillar up the inside of each side, just to kind of put a bit more colour there in between each roof, because of the isometric view, you can't really see in between each roof piece. So the kind of walls that I did in the middle are kind of pointless, to be honest, but I just did it anyway. So now I'm going to add these little pillars on the corners just for like a bit of detail, and again to add a bit more colour up throughout the roofs. So now I'm just going to take the flat roof piece and put it in between every roof to join up those kind of flicky bits on the corners. And then I'm just going to take this little canopy piece and put it on the top there to make it a bit more thicker on the top. So I'm going to place some more rocks down around the kind of queue area here to tie in with the corkscrew kind of area. So now I'm going to go in and build the fences for the queue line. So I'm going to use the stone wall piece, which looks really cool, and then I'm taking that wooden fence that I used before in the game to lay it on top of those stone pieces, just to kind of create a bit more of an interesting looking path fence. So I'm going to do that around all of the queue line paths. And here I'm just making it slightly higher around the bottom of the coaster so that people couldn't get over the wall to get underneath in that dangerous kind of area where the track is in the train. So now I'm going to go on each corner using the same kind of the cube shape that I've used already. As I said before, I really like this piece. So I'm just going to go on every corner and put that down to just make it look more like a designed, finished looking fence. And then I'm going to take the sphere from the shapes and make it as small as possible and put it on the top of each column. Now I'm going to use the bamboo lamp and put it throughout the queue line so that it would be lit at night time. I thought the bamboo lamp fitted in perfect with this theme of the ride. It's not a lamp I've actually used before, I always use the generic one. And then I'm going to pop in some TV screens so that the people that are standing in line can watch the telly if they're bored. So now I want to make like a little shrubbery bed. So I thought it'd be cool to put that on the corner of the station to break up the path from the ride. So I'm just placing some of the bushes and stuff at random. And then I decided that I might pop this tree in like a pink to give it like a cherry blossom colour. I thought that was kind of very Japanese styled, maybe. So I kind of pop a few of those throughout the ride, and just to tie a bit more colour into it. So I'm not 100% sure if the pink trees look good or if they look really fake or not, but I've gone for it anyway. And then I decided to add in this kind of more cube styled tree as well, just to add a bit more design and shape to the kind of shrubbery. So now I decided that the ride should have some water, so I thought, okay, I'll put some water maybe over the curved area where the corkscrews are and where the station is, and maybe the queue line where the pagoda is, there might be water around there, which would be really cool. So I've gone ahead and done that just in this small area and added some lily pads on top of the water. I am aware that the bushes that I used to get rid of the supports are now submerged underwater, but I think if you didn't really look for it, you wouldn't really notice. So we're just going to leave that, because if I get rid of the bush, then the support will come back. I think it'd be really cool if there was like a toggle button on the coaster settings where you can turn off supports or turn them on, and that way you could just select to turn them all off and build all your own and not have the problem of having to delete every support with a bush or something, because it can get quite annoying sometimes when the support keeps popping up, or maybe like I just said, you have a bush underwater to get rid of one, which you don't really want the bush there. So I'm using the rocks here just to kind of create a fence borderline from the water to the area where the pedestrian people would be. When I think of like Japanese theming, I really think of these beautiful gardens, the pagodas, and the rock work, and maybe some statues, or that kind of thing. So that's what I've tried to create around the queue line and some parts of the ride. So I'm going to add this. I already did put umbrellas in. I didn't like them, so I didn't show you me doing them. But as you just saw, I put in like those wooden kind of canopy things from the pavilions part of the scenery, and just put them along the paths where the track would cross over the top. Just in case anything fell out of the people's pockets, it wouldn't hurt the person underneath in the path. So now I decided to do one of these like Japanese kind of style entrance gates. So I'm just using the cylinder again, and then I'm just going to use the border pieces and make those red, and then just join them up to create like a somewhat Japanese style gate there for the entrance of the ride. One thing I have a problem with always, and that's naming my coasters. I had no idea. I was trying to think what I could do. I asked my wife what I should call it, and she said something to do with the dragon, and I thought that was a bit cliche, but I couldn't think of anything else, so I decided to make the train black and call it the Black Dragon. It's a bit of a cop-out, a bit simple, but the purpose of this video was to show you basically what you can do with the pieces in the game, rather than me making this really crazy ride with a great name. So excuse the name of the ride. So here I am. It's basically the finished coaster. The train runs around it really well. I'm really happy with everything, and I think the scenery looks really cool, and it's really great what you can do in the game without using mods. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.